Meeting to order at 9:04 p.m. Eastern Time. Madam Secretary, can you call the roll?
Okay, and this time I'm going to group regionals with their alternates, so I don't need to go back. Ms. Bilyeu.
Here.
Ms. Adams.
Present.
Mr. Bowen.
Here.
Ms. Epke.
Here.
Mr. Hagan.
Here.
I am present. Mr. Hewitt.
I'm here.
Mr. Fiera.
Present.
Ms. Hogarth.
Here.
Mr. Valente.
Present.
Mr. Longstreth.
Present.
Mr. Nana.
I'm here.
Mr. Hall. Mr. Hall. Mr. Nikela.
Present.
Mr. Sexton.
Present.
Mr. Phillips.
Present, and Mr. Buffman has already indicated he will not be here.
Thank you. Mr. Routset.
I am here.
Ms. Sarwark.
Here.
Mr. Smith.
Present.
Mr. Lucchini.
Here.
And I know the acting chair is here. I'm going back to Mr. Hall. Okay, Mr. Chair, it appears that Mr. Hall and Mr. Buffman are not present, but their primaries are.
Excellent. So we have quorum. Excellent. All right. Madam Secretary, and I guess the whole board, let me start by saying we're not doing public comment tonight because this is a continuation of the meeting from last night. This is not a new meeting. This is the same meeting continued. That was what we adjourned last night to this time and date. And that's why we're just picking up exactly where we left off last night, just after midnight. And if in that vein, Madam Secretary, do you have the motion handy as amended where we left off last night?
I did, but I need to find it again. I kept bumping it up. And I know Mr. Nikala did the same thing. Yeah, here we go.
Okay.
Other people kept bumping it. Thank you. Do you need me to read it or bump it again? I'm going to bump it.
Yes, bump it
To
on
the
the
top.
list, please. Yep.
And I can post it in chat. I have to do it in chat by paragraph because it's too long to do one post.
That is fine. I just want to make sure that all the committee members can definitely see what we're doing. And then also the people in the gallery who are here can also see it.
So I'm going 2 paragraphs by 2 paragraphs into chat.
Okay.
It's in chat.
Thank you very much, Ms. Harlows. Okay. So
Is
where
Richard here? I saw his name flash for being in the waiting room.
Mr. Longstreth? Make sure.
Will you shut the door, Wayne?
Here we go again.
All right. So where we are right now, there's a motion on the floor. We are back to discussion of the main motion. I will note that I do not remember who spoke, whether in favor or against last night.
We left with Ms. Bilyeu.
Okay. And I seem to recall Ms. Bilyeu wanted to see some language about caucuses, but did not have the specific language at the time. Does anyone want to speak in favor or against the motion? Or of course, it is always in order to bring forth an amendment. And I see Ms. Bilyeu's hand is up, and she was the last to speak. So go ahead, Ms. Bilyeu.
Yeah, I would just move to amend to add specifically the language regarding note that not only they can't be LNC members, but they also can't be caucus members, and not just leadership, but caucus members. That's what I what I would like to see. And it's really just adding a couple words wherever we think is appropriate.
So if I understand your motion correctly, you are moving to amend the final sentence of the first paragraph to read, no LNC members or caucus members shall be eligible to serve on this committee.
That would suffice, yes.
Okay, there has been a motion made. Is there a second?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
this is Joshua Smith, at large. I would be amenable to seconding that if the language was changed to say no caucuses as of June 6th, since the second biggest caucus in the party, the Libertarian Pragmatist Caucus, dissolved yesterday. So,
Mr. Chair, this is out of order.
Yes, it is out of order. I was just going to say there is a motion on the floor, and we are not in a caucus committee of the whole. So
I will second.
that is a second by Mr. Lucchini. So we are now in discussion. Ms. Bilyeu, would you like to speak to your amendment?
I would just think it's important that if we want this to truly be an impartial investigative body, then we need to make sure that there are no members from either of the caucuses that were involved or any other ones for that matter. And with regard to what Mr. Smith just said, I don't really understand what the date has to do with anything. If we know that someone was in a caucus that was involved in this thing, then that counts.
Mr. Chair, if I can speak,
And I also have you can't see my hand, but.
I've had my hand up for.
Oh, yeah, no, you were definitely first.
All right. So I have Smith, Nana, and Carlos.
I have my hand up as well.
Oh, I'm sorry. I see that now. And I also see some more hands going up. All right. We've got them going up now. All right. Hang on. Let's go ahead and hear from Mr. Smith. Go ahead, Mr. Smith.
Okay, so the date is important to me because as of June 6th is basically the first time we found out about any correspondence with regards to the matter at hand. The Pragmatist Caucus, it existed then, and your amendment doesn't have language that talks about that. I mean, your amendment is just no caucuses, but none of those people are in the caucus anymore because the Pragmatist Caucus dissolved yesterday. So I want to make sure that if all the caucuses are going to be excluded, then we need to also exclude the caucus that dissolved yesterday as well. And that needs to be explicit in the amendment. Otherwise, people just be like, oh, I'm not in a caucus, and then it's people who were involved in this factional thing that we're all worried about. So I just want to make sure that is stated. That's all I'm worried about.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Nana.
Thank you. So I am with the intent of this amendment. I understand the intent, but I don't know how the heck how are we gonna police it? I mean, how do we know what defines a member of a caucus? What caucuses count? Does the Waffle House caucus count? Does the Libertarian Dad caucus count? I mean, what is the scope of this, and how the heck do we define a member? I think honestly at this point we're going to need to bite the bullet and go completely outside the party if we want a truly impartial investigation, because I don't know how we police whether or not you're in the caucus or whether or not you're a member, or were you a member on such and such date, especially now that since one of the caucuses has dissolved, we're not going to be able to demand membership roles from a caucus. So I don't see how we even enforce this.
Stephen Akela here.
Okay, so I'm looking at the list here. Okay, so everybody's going to talk. Cool. All right, we're good. Let me write these all down here, and I apologize. And again, my issue is that the hands don't always go up in the correct order. Mr. Harris, who do you see?
I can assist with order if you would like.
That would be wonderful. Thank you.
I see Smith, Ebke, Lucchini, Valente.
Okay, and I assume Smith is an artifact?
Yeah.
Smith has just lowered. So I see Ebke, Lucchini, Valente, Raudsep.
Nikela would also like to be recognized.
And mine has been physically raised since the beginning.
Okay. Let's see. So we've heard 1 for, 2 against. Okay. I'm just trying to see it. We'll just do it. All right. We'll just go on. All right. Let's hear from Ms. Harlos, and then we will go down the list as the hands are shown on the electronic.
Thank you. Some of the same concerns, right? Does the Libertarian Get Naked Caucus? What about the Libertarian Alligator Caucus? We can't define this, but I have another wrinkle to add to this. According to the Pragmatist Caucus bylaws, every single member of the Libertarian Party was considered a member of their caucus, because I had been complaining about being a member of a caucus without my consent since their bylaws were drafted. So nobody would be able to be in this committee. The better way is put forth good candidates, and we can vet these candidates about their background, their biases, and their potential caucus involvement. That's the way to responsibly handle it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Harlos. Ms. Ebke.
Yeah, actually, I find myself in agreement with both Ms. Harlos and Mr. Nana. I appreciate the intent, but I do think that we run into a bit of a problem with trying to figure out who's a member of what caucus, because, do we go based on Facebook group membership? Do we go on who's liked pages? Do we just do the caucus formerly known as the Pragmatist Caucus, or do we do we look at the Mises Caucus, or just those two? Is it the Radical Caucus? Is it the Audacious Caucus? I mean, I think we really run into a problem, and I don't know that we have any way. We don't have any authority to demand membership or mailing lists from either of those caucuses, or any of the caucuses, I don't believe. So even the larger caucuses would be problematic.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Ebke. I'm going to ask right now, of the people that have their hands up, is there anyone who actually wants to speak in favor of this motion, this amendment?
Partially.
Okay. Well, you're on deck next anyway, Mr. Lucchini, so go ahead.
Okay, it's Lucchini with a hard C, just so
I'm
you know.
sorry.
So I find myself in agreement with both our secretary and Ms. Ebke. I appreciate the sentiment. I think it's unworkable. I would like to offer a friendly amendment to remove the caucus language and substitute any LNC member or immediate past LNC member or staff. So immediate past staff, I don't know how you define that. I'd have to work on that language a little bit, but I would like to, can I make it a motion to amend the amendment?
I wish you wouldn't.
It would be out of order at this time, Mr. Molman, if you would like.
I tend to agree that it would be out of order. I think if to try to make this simple and get through this as quickly as possible, let's take amendments, get only one deep, let's dispense with it and get back to the main and see if we can get done tonight. I really want to have this hammered out tonight if we can. So if it's okay with you, Mr. Lucchini.
I will then just call the question and be done with it.
Okay, then Mr. Lucchini has called the question. Is there
It was a good amendment. We could have done it, but.
All right, question's been called. Is there a second on calling the question?
Second.
All right, there's a second. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Is there an objection?
To passing the amendment, I suspect.
No, to calling the question.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Is there objection to calling the question?
This is on calling the question.
Yep. Is there objection to calling the question? I'm not hearing any objection to calling the question, in which case then let's call the roll on the actual amendment.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Bilyeu?
Yes.
And everyone's clear this is on the amendment. Okay, thank you. Mr. Bowen?
No.
Ms. Epke?
No.
Mr. Hagan?
No.
I will vote no. Mr. Hewitt?
Can you repeat what the amendment is? I'm sorry.
It's on my other screen. Do you have it handy, Mr.? I don't want to blow up my cursor again.
Yes, the amendment is that at the end of the first paragraph where it currently reads, no LNC members shall be eligible to serve on this committee, would be amended to read, no LNC members or caucus members shall be eligible to serve on this committee.
Okay, I vote no.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Hogarth,
No.
Mr. Longstreth,
Yes.
Mr. Nana,
No.
Mr. Nikela,
No.
Mr. Phillips,
No.
Mr. Routset,
No.
Ms. Sarwark,
No.
Mr. Smith,
Nope.
Mr. Lucchini,
No.
Mr. Chair, it's 2 in favor, 13 opposed.
The chair will not vote. So, all right, so that means that with a vote of 2 to 13, the amendment fails, and we are back to the main motion.
I'd like to make a amendment.
Okay, Mr. Lucchini, your amendment?
Essentially the same language as previously, with the caucus language deleted and immediate past LNC members or staff being excluded.
Okay, so I think what I'm hearing you say is that the amendment would read, no LNC members, immediate past LNC members, or staff.
Staff or immediately
or
past staff.
immediately past staff
Mr.
shall
Chair,
be eligible.
Mr. Chair, point of inquiry.
Yes, Mr. Smith.
Is it what? Aren't we going to involve staff when we look through emails and stuff? Wasn't Tyler like initially going to be a part of it?
Well, they're acting at the direction of the investigatory body, not on it. They don't vote on it.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess if it's just the committee, that makes sense. But I know that initially we were talking about having Tyler be a part of it. So.
And actually, when I say it, let me amend let me rephrase mine. So
Okay. There has not been a second, so you have the opportunity.
Okay. So where it says no LNC member, immediate past LNC member, or anyone who has been staff for the last 5 years.
Okay.
Because immediate past staff, I have no idea what that means.
So is everyone clear what the amendment is, or do they need that reread?
I'll second it.
Okay, the motion then is made by Mr. Lucchini and seconded by Mr. Hagan. We are now in discussion. Mr. Lucchini, would you like to speak in favor?
I believe that excluding LNC members is wise, but there has been historical conflicts between current LNC and some former LNC are in that area. So I think it just makes sense to broaden the scope of the exclusion to make sure that we don't have any other potential issues. I will say that I agree with Ms. Harlos that I'm fairly certain that we will pick the appropriate people and we don't need to over specify the restrictions here. So.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Lucchini. Is there anyone who would like to speak against? I'm sorry, I'm trying to pull the participants back up. I see that there are 4 people in queue.
Yeah, I would like to speak against, Mr. Chair.
Okay. And Mr. Harris, is Mr. Nana the first one on your list as well, or who's on your list?
I have Mr. Bowen, Ms. Adams, Mr. Nana, Ms. Epke.
Adams, Nana, Epke. Thank you, Mr. Harris. Let's go, Mr. Bowen.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question just concerning the language. Are we saying that we are restricting anyone who has served on the LNC for the last 5 years and anyone who has been hired as staff for the last 5 years? I think I'm okay with that. I just want to bring to the attention of the board that are we eliminating someone who may be potentially a good member to put on that committee? I don't know the answer. I'm just want to make sure that that is the exact wording. We are going to restrict that 5 years back from the date that we approve the motion. And I'd like to hear people's thoughts on whether that might be too restrictive. Thank you.
I can tell you how it's worded.
Nikela here.
Hold on one moment. Mr. Lucchini, would you like to respond to that?
So I believe the way that it's worded, it restricts LNC and immediate past LNC. So if you were replaced by somebody who's on the current LNC, then you would be immediately past. So that is typically going to be a 2-year prohibition. I am completely open to a friendly amendment to simply put a year number on it. I also think that I'm completely open to changing 5 years to any other time period. I am not beating the drum on this, so I would like to hear other people's opinion on those restrictions.
As would I. Thank you, Mr. Lucchini.
Next, I have Ms. Adams.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't know that I'm speaking against it. I don't think that it's a bad amendment, but something Mr. Nana said kind of hit home with me when he said the only way we get a truly kind of clean, fair, unbiased investigation is if we go 100% outside, and maybe that's the way to go. Initially, I supported Mr. Nikela's original motion. I really thought that was the way to go, and now I think maybe anybody who touches this, when we're talking about bias, we all have it. So maybe going completely outside of our organization is the way to go. And I know a lot of people are going to be reluctant about spending that money, but I think we're talking again about investing in the future of our party, and it might be important.
Thank you, Ms. Adams. Mr. Nana?
Are we on the amendment?
We are on the amendment.
Okay, because that was kind of way off coast.
So I'm going to try to speak directly to the amendment. So I think this overcomplicates it. I think I would be amenable to the amendment saying something like no past LNC member or past staff, period. And I think that would clean it up and make it a lot easier. That way we just know who is eligible and who's not right off the bat. But, you know, as I said earlier, I think we're going to have to change this motion in a way that makes it so that no party member is a part of this investigation, period.
Thank you, Mr. Nana. Ms. Ebke.
Yeah, my my only concern with this is again what Mr. Bowen and Mr. Lucchini have both talked about. I think that to tighten it up in this particular amendment, I think a time frame is reasonable. 5 years, 7 years. I don't know what the magic number is, but I think we should put a time frame on it, because otherwise, if we're going to go with members, we lose a fairly significant number of people who might be interested, but who haven't, you know, who aren't recent members, but who could deal with things fairly moderately. So I mean, I just like to see a time frame. If we're going to say 5 years for staff, I would also say 5 years for the LNC members, somebody who's been out for at least 5 years.
Point of information.
I heard a point of information. I don't know who.
It's Lucchini. Can I withdraw this motion since it's been seconded?
It's not technically, no. Since we're not in a committee of the whole, I don't think we can.
He can withdraw it if there's no objection.
Okay. Mr. Brown says it can be withdrawn if there's no objection. So, Mr. Lucchini, are you asking for it to be withdrawn?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Is there objection to this amendment being withdrawn? I am not hearing objection to this amendment proposal being withdrawn. So we are now back to the main motion.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to speak on the main motion, please.
Okay. Mr. Nikela, I don't know who's... All right. So now we've got a problem of we've got artifacts of hands raised for lots of things. Yes. So we're back to here. Mr. Harris, I actually show Mr. Nikela as the next speaker. Is he showing that on yours?
I do as well, followed by Mr. Longstreth and Mr. Nana.
Perfect. Mr. Nikela, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to make it understood that if this motion passes, the body, the LNC, will choose who serves on this committee. So we could go into the details later on when we choose based on the merits of each individual who we'd like to be a part of this committee. Coming up with different amendments as to restrictions now, it's not necessary in my opinion, because we'll be voting on the individuals later on. So I think that's up to the board anyway. So we should just focus on those merits. And for full disclosure, I did speak with Mr. Jim Turney of Florida. He is a past LNC chair. He's not a member of any caucus. He's a very
He's
neutral individual.
on the JC.
Correct. He's on the JC, as is Mr. Tom Arnold, and that will be something to be discussed. There's also others who I know that I believe others on this committee have spoken to are also willing to serve on this investigatory committee. So we can definitely speak to the merits of those individuals, but there are those that I believe would be very well fit to serve on this committee that have agreed to do so. So I just wanted to make that apparent to the board and that we all understand that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nicola. Mr. Longstreth.
Yes, I would move to require that any person that the LNC commits be a minimum of a member for 5 years in the party in good standing.
All right, let me see here. So that will be trying to see
A second.
I'm trying to see where that's going to fit into this motion.
It would be in the same place as all of these other qualifiers would be. So it'd be, everywhere else we've been considering this. Right at the end of, I believe, the second paragraph. Give me a second. Let's see. I'll point out that yesterday this wasn't so much a concern figured out. So it looks like it's actually at the end of the first paragraph where it says no LNC member shall be eligible to serve on this committee. I would also add a sentence that reads, anyone selected must be a member in good standing of the National Party for a minimum of 5 years.
And I seconded that.
Okay, so the motion has been made and seconded to amend to add the sentence, and please correct me if this is incorrect. Anyone selected must be a member in good standing of the National Party for a minimum of the last 5 years.
Correct. That is my motion.
Okay, and it has been seconded. And so, Mr. Longstreth, would you like to speak to your motion?
I believe it is somewhat self-explanatory, but I will go ahead and speak on it. The fact of the matter is this is a movement that has come up in the party. The result of this election that happened in March was because of new people that ran for the board who previously were not involved. I would like to be as impartial as possible, and short of hiring our own private investigator or going outside of this group, the best way that we can try and gauge any sort of independence are people who have been with this party for a certain amount of time and who have seen the ebb and flow of how these things work. And I think that it is imperative that us as a group recognize that experience in this party is the only way that we might actually get some sort of an unbiased decision. Again, absent hiring a private investigator or something similar. So that is why I am pushing this, and I would encourage my fellow committee members to do the same.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Longstreth. Mr. Harris, I see in my queue, now it's Mr. Lucchini is at the top, then Nana, then Rodsep. How do you have them on yours since mine keeps jumping?
I have Mr. Nana, Mr. Lucchini, and then Mr. Rousseau.
Okay. All right. Mr. Nana, are you speaking against this motion? Okay, then Mr. Nana, you are recognized.
I have the floor, right?
You do, yes.
Okay. So here's the thing. We can sit here and argue over these amendments all night. We can come up with arbitrary rules about who can serve and who can't. Mr. Nicola said something earlier that I do also agree with. It's going to eventually be up to us to decide. At the same time, I think we're never going to get this hashed out through an email ballot, in my opinion. So I personally would not support this amendment because it's just muddying the waters even further. Again, whenever I get the chance to have the floor first, when we get back to the main motion, I'm going to have an amendment of my own.
Thank you, Mr. Nana. Mr. Lucchini, are you speaking in favor of the amendment?
Yeah, it's on. Yes, I am.
All right, then Mr. Lucchini, you are recognized.
So I think this is a rational thing to do. One thing I will note, I believe that there's nothing that would preclude this committee from hiring a PI to do some of its work, right? So we can have both with this motion without specifying excessive amount of restrictions on the committee members. So I'd like to, as soon as we're, I guess there's a couple more people, but let's vote on this and move on.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Ms. Harless,
point of personal privilege.
go ahead.
There is a very important email having to do with the entire situation that's in our inbox that I really believe the LNC needs to take a look at. The title of it is an LNC contact form called "We Need to Stop Escalating Tensions." There's very, very important information in there. Thank you.
It's out of order. This is out of order.
Yeah, all right.
The chair allowed me. Thank you.
It's okay. Let's do this. Mr. Rodsep, you were in the speaking queue on this amendment. Mr. Rodsep, you are recognized. I believe that's the last person on this amendment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I understand the spirit of this, and I agree with the spirit of this, but I believe that we have already headed in the direction of hiring an outside organization. I would suggest hiring a lawyer and not a private investigator, because a private investigator is basically just a legal stalker. But a team of lawyers would be what I would like to see on this to get a fair and impartial result.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Rodsep. Is there anyone else that would like to speak to this amendment?
What is the amendment on the table? Because I am thoroughly lost at this point.
No problem. The amendment is that anyone selected must be a member in good standing of the National Party for a minimum of the last 5 years.
Gotcha. Okay. And is this an amendment to the other amendment? Because we never voted on the other amendment.
The other amendment was withdrawn without objection.
Okay, gotcha.
So we went back to the main motion, and now we are amending the main motion.
Thank you very much.
No problem.
Yeah, I'm going to vote this down, and when it's voted down, I'm going to reintroduce the amendment that was withdrawn without objection. That was perfectly fine. We need to vet our candidates, and that will solve it. And as far as this going to an outside firm, since it keeps coming in, even though it's not really on the table, I think I should be allowed to speak to it. There's a lot of history and culture here that are very important, like Oregon, Arizona, the way our judicial committee works, that I think will be absolutely lost with an outside firm. And I think we've got some really, really, really good members. I know I've heard some of the suggestions of people, and I think we can do this.
Ms. Harless, does anyone else want to speak to this amendment?
Yes, I'd like to, Mr. Chair.
I believe that's
Mr. Chair, my hand is up.
I am so sorry, guys.
I'll yield to Mr. Longstreth. That's no problem.
Mr. Harris, can you tell me whose hands are up currently?
I see Mr. Nana's hand up. I'm not sure if that's an artifact or if that is.
It's so I can line for the main motion. Ignore me.
Okay, so that is being ignored, and then I see Mr. Bowen and Mr. Longstreth.
Okay. Mr. Bowen, are you speaking for or against?
I actually have a question concerning
Go
it.
ahead.
Again, would this amendment actually preclude us from appointing a non-Libertarian Party member to the board, to the committee?
It's not the way I read it. Now, Mr. Longstreth, was that your intent to exclude non-Libertarian Party members?
Well, so here's the crossroads, and that touches a little bit on my speaking point. So I'll be brief, and I'll just say, yes, the way I worded the amendment, that would be the effect because it requires a minimum of 5 years in the party to serve on our investigation. I have more to comment on that when it's my turn to speak.
I yield.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bowen. Mr. Longstreth, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So my thoughts are this: if we have two choices in my mind that are the most agreeable, and one of those is we keep it inside the House. We rely on the history of this party. We rely on people who have been around, who understand the nuances, who at least to some degree understand the struggles that happen in Oregon, and that sort of thing. And we rely on them. And that would require 5 years of being in this party as an estimate. I mean, within 5 years, I would expect you would have at least heard about Oregon once. And so that is where that line comes from. The other option, if this is voted down, is I would be very much in favor of hiring an outside firm or PI or hiring somebody independent of this LNC. But I just don't see how we can let anybody be on this committee. And I want some sort of a guideline for this LNC when we get to the next step this evening of trying to populate these names. So either we choose now, it's got to be people older than 5 years in the party, or we shoot that down, in which case I would be very supportive of hiring a PI or somebody else not within the party. But we have a choice to make. Which avenue do we want to go? So when you vote for this amendment, that would be the consideration that I would ask that you take into account before casting that vote.
Thank you, Mr. Longstreth. I still see Mr. Bowen's hand up. I assume that's an artifact. Yep. Okay. And then
It
Mr.
is.
Nana
I'm sorry.
That is no problem. Mr. Nana is for the main motion. Is there anyone else that wants to speak to this amendment? I'm not seeing or hearing anyone. Therefore, we will move to a vote. I believe I'm not going to get away with this, but is there objection to the amendment?
Yes, there is.
Okay.
I object.
Then Ms. Harlos, would you please call the roll? Everyone's caught up on what we're voting on here? Adding a sentence to the end of the first paragraph that reads, anyone selected must be a member in good standing of the National Party for a minimum of the last 5 years. Madam Secretary, when you are ready, I am.
Okay, certainly. Ms. Bilyeu.
Yes.
Mr. Bowen.
Pass.
Ms. Epke.
Yes.
Oh, I put that in the wrong spot. Forgive me. Mr. Hagan.
I'll abstain.
I am passing. Mr. Hewitt.
I say no.
Ms. Hogarth.
Yes.
Mr. Longstreth.
Yes.
Mr. Nana.
No.
Mr. Nikela.
No, let's just get to the vote.
Mr. Phillips.
Abstain.
Mr. Routset.
No.
Ms. Sarwark.
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
No.
Mr. Lucchini.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to the passes. The first pass was Mr. Bowen with a vote of 6-5. Did you hear me, Mr. Bowen?
I'm sorry, I was on mute. I'm going to vote no.
Lord have mercy, this is a lot of fun. It's now a vote of 6-6, and I really hate to do this to you, Mr. Chair, but I am voting yes, which makes it 7-6.
Okay.
If you don't vote, it passes. If you do vote yes, it still passes, but you probably just shouldn't vote. And if you
Right.
vote no, it ties and fails.
Correct. I am not going to vote.
7-6 to 2. There's a 2 abstentions.
All right. So 7-6, the amendment passes. The sentence is added to the end of the first paragraph, and we are now back at the main motion as amended. Mr. Nana, you still have your hand up. Do you want to speak?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of precludes me from doing what I wanted to do. So I'm just going to call the question on the main motion.
Seconded.
Okay, there's a motion for calling the question and a second, or not a motion, but calling question and a second. Is there objection to calling the question? I'm not hearing any objection to calling the question on the main motion. So I'll try this. Is there objection to the main motion as amended?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay, there is objection. Then, Madam Secretary, will you please take the roll? Take the vote.
Ms. Bilyeu,
Yes.
Mr. Bowen,
Still thinking, pass.
Ms. Epke,
Yes.
Mr. Hagan.
Yes.
I shall vote yes. Mr. Hewitt,
I will abstain. My region is against any kind of investigation since it's a moot point now. Everything seems to be back where it was before.
Ms. Hogarth,
Yes.
Mr. Longstreth,
Mr. Hewitt brings up a good point. I abstain.
Mr. Nana,
No.
Mr. Nikela,
Yes, we have to investigate the corruption. Yes.
Mr. Phillips,
Yes.
Mr. Routsep. I'm sorry,
Yes.
Ms. Sarwark,
I'm going to agree with Mr. Longstreth and Mr. Hewitt, and I'll abstain.
Mr. Smith,
Pass for a second.
Mr. Lucchini,
I'm thinking I'm going to pass for a second.
okay, I'm going back to the first pass. The votes right now are 8 in favor, 1 opposed, 3 abstentions. Mr. Bowen?
I'm going to abstain.
Okay, that puts me back to Mr. Smith.
I'll vote no.
And Mr. Lucchini. We're at 8-4.
So it doesn't matter how I vote.
Only for the record.
I'm going to expressly abstain.
Okay, Mr. Chair, we have 8 in favor, 2 opposed, 5 express abstentions.
Okay, the chair will not vote. The motion passes 8-2 to 5. And now we're back at our generic agenda, which I have lost the notes on exactly how that was worded, but I believe
Motion to adjourn.
there's been a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
There is a second for a motion to adjourn. Is there objection to adjourning?
Yes.
I object.
Okay, there is multiple objections to adjourning. I believe then we just go to a vote. Ms. Harlos, can you call the roll on adjournment?
One moment, I think when the adjournment closes the assembly, you are allowed to debate, but I was clearing out my ballot and I need to look up my Roberts unless Mr. Brown is here.
Point of parliamentary inquiry.
Go ahead.
If we object to this adjournment, would we move immediately on to the, because the motion expresses that we would move on to immediately vote on the 3 members of the committee, would it be in order to move on to those votes at that time? Or would we be at the orders of the day in adjournment regardless?
The orders of the day are discussion of the latest happenings in the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire affiliate. I believe at least that's a summary version. which is very open and open to anyone making any motion regarding that.
Mr. Chair, this is Mr. Brown.
Go ahead, Mr. Brown.
Regarding the question by Ms. Harlos, adjourning from this does not
Not debatable.
in the existence of the assembly. It just simply ends this meeting, just like any other adjournment.
I also have a point of inquiry.
Okay. The point of inquiry, I can't see who's making it, but go ahead.
It's Mr. Smith.
Go ahead, Mr. Smith.
If we were to not adjourn and start working on these 3 positions for this ad hoc committee, are the people who would be nominated for that on this call to be vetted? Because if we're gonna nominate them and vet them and vote on them tonight, I mean, probably gonna take a while. So.
Mr. Smith, I cannot answer that question. I do see that we have 181 people here, of which 17 or so, 16 of them are us, a handful of staff, Mr. Brown, etc. But I can't speak for anyone who may be nominated and whether or not they're here.
I have a suggestion, Mr. Chair. But there are other people ahead of me, Mr. Valente and Mr. Lucchini.
I believe that we have a motion to adjourn.
Oh, sorry, you're correct.
On the floor. So, and I apologize. I know that adjourning final and adjourning to another meeting are 2 different things. Which one was the debatable one? Are we debating
This is not debatable.
That's what I thought. So, Madam Secretary, Ms. Harlos, can you please call the roll?
Ms. Bilyeu?
No.
Mr. Bowen?
No.
Ms. Epke?
No.
Mr. Hagan?
No.
I shall vote no. Mr. Hewitt?
Emphatic yes.
Ms. Hogarth?
Yes.
Mr. Longstreth?
No.
Mr. Nana?
Yes.
Mr. Nikela?
No.
Mr. Phillips?
Abstain.
Mr. Roudsep?
Yes.
Ms. Sarwark?
No.
Mr. Smith?
No.
Mr. Lucchini?
No.
Okay, Mr. Chair, I have 5 yeses and 9 nos.
Okay, and the chair will not vote. The motion fails to adjourn. We are back to the item of business that we were called for, which is discussions.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Ferrer.
I just want to let you know that I am going to be leaving the meeting temporarily. I will announce when I'm back.
You said you will or will not be returning?
I am going to try to return.
Okay, thank you,
I
Mr.
was really hoping for the adjournment. Bye.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Chair,
I heard Ms. Harlows first, so we'll go with her and go ahead.
I have a suggestion for how to proceed.
Okay.
I would think it would be appropriate for LNC members tonight to make nominations, and we just note them all down. Then those same LNC members can invite, and we also set a new meeting, and these LNC members can invite their nominees to come to that meeting to be vetted, and we choose them at that meeting.
Okay.
I just have a brief procedural note.
Go ahead, Ms. Hogarth.
If my alternate David is available to step in, I need to step out for a variable amount of time. Could be 10 minutes, could be half hour.
Okay.
I'm here. I'm good.
Mr.
Thank
Valente,
you.
you're in the driver's seat, Mr. Valente. All right, Mr. Harris, can you tell me, there are 3 names, I see hands up, and I apologize. Who is next in line?
I have the order as Mr. Lucchini, Mr. Nikela, and then Mr. Longstreth.
Perfect. Then Mr. Lucchini, you are recognized.
I actually was just trying to find out with Mr. Longstreth, so I'm just going to pass my time.
Okay. Who was it Mr. Nikela was next, I believe?
That is what I have.
Okay. Mr. Nikela, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. While I do think that we could certainly move forward with nominations for another meeting. I do understand that Mr. Tom Arnold has agreed to be on this committee. So at this time, I would ask if there's a second. I would think it's appropriate to move forward with a motion to appoint Tom Arnold as one of those members to the committee.
Okay, it is in order. There has been a motion to appoint Mr. Tom Arnold as one of the members of the investigative committee. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, Mr. Valente seconds that motion. We are now in discussion on the appointment of Tom Arnold to the committee.
Objection.
And okay, I see your hand, Ms. Harlos. I also, Mr. Harris, can you tell me, I see hands going up and I already had Nana, Longstreth, and Valente in the queue on the main motion. Can you tell me what the current queue looks like?
The current order that I have is Longstreth, Nana, Valente, Lucchini, Hagan, Adams.
Mr. Chair, I don't mean to interrupt. Wouldn't it be in order to take multiple nominations at once? That way we don't do this piecemeal one at a time and get bogged down.
Second.
Mr. Nana, it is in order to take them one at a time as a group. There's plenty of ways this could be done.
Well, I'm asking because I would like to nominate someone, but I don't know. They are here in the chat, and I don't know if, I don't want to trample on the Mr. Michaela nominating Mr. Arnold. That's all. Just trying to be courteous.
If I may make a suggestion, Mr. Nana, that once we dispense with the nomination of Mr. Arnold, that you make that motion at that time.
Certainly.
Mr. Chair, do you mind if I speak to my motion?
Not at all. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I understand we might not have 3 people tonight, or we may or may not. I don't know. But I figure the closer we can get to that 3, and if we can get to the 3 tonight, then by God, let's do it. I know Mr. Arnold, he is an impartial figure in the Libertarian Party of Tennessee. In the Libertarian Party, he has been around for a very long time. I consider him a wise man, a very impartial man. He is not a caucus member to my knowledge. He is a member of the Judicial Committee. Just want to point that out there. I don't see that, and I've spent some time contemplating whether or not that may or may not be a problem. I don't see that as a potential issue, because if the JC were to take this up, then the members of the committee that are JC are going to find out this information anyway. So it would hopefully be impartial regardless. So with that said, I think piecemealing them together one at a time might be the most appropriate, since I know that we had some questions as to what guidelines we want to hold them to, whether or not they're X, Y, and Z. And I think instead of a slate, going one at a time might be the most appropriate. So if we have our nominations and they've already agreed, and Mr. Arnold has already agreed, I would like to put him forward to be a member of this body. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Nicola. Mr. Longstreth, did you want to speak to this nomination?
I mean, I've been wanting to speak on many things, but I'll go ahead and seize this opportunity since it's the first time in a while. So I will go ahead and if we want to do this piecemeal, I'm fine with that. We are currently in a motion, so I'm not going to fight against that. I think Mr. Arnold is a fantastic nomination. I would suggest for our other 2 nominations, perhaps, though, we open up for nominations and then we do maybe a fill in the blank or something like that to appoint the others. But that said, I am curious, Mr. Chair, are there other speakers in the queue on Mr. Arnold specifically? And if not, I would like to call the question. But if there are, I will not do that. So I leave that to your prerogative there.
Thank you, Mr. Longstreth. I think so. So let me double check.
I can't hear you, Ken.
You guys can't hear me?
I can hear you.
Uh-oh.
Ken, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yes, I can hear you. On my app
Mr.
issues.
Phillips's headsets may have run out of batteries. That happens. Bluetooth, the joys. All right. Mr. Nana, did you want to speak to this particular?
My hand is up to make a nomination. No, sir.
And my hand was up right from the beginning.
Let me do this. Let me get Mr. Valente, if he wants to speak.
Yes.
All right, Mr. Valente, you're recognized. And then Ms. Harlos, you will go immediately after Valente.
Okay.
Yes, I can't find anybody who is better to serve on this committee than Tom Arnold, someone who loves this party, someone who is a force of good in this party. And the only concern I do have is the judicial committee piece, where, if it does end up back in the judicial committee, then whether they would have to recuse themselves or not. And perhaps, I know that Jim Turney's name was brought up as well. Maybe not put two members of the judicial committee on there. But anyway, Tom Arnold's a fantastic libertarian. Definitely needs to be on this board. I yield.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Valente. And Ms. Harlos.
Okay, I repeat all of the compliments of Tom Arnold. That's the reason he's on the Judicial Committee. Liberty Santa is loved by all. But the fact is, there's not just one JC thing he might be impacted by. There might be two. We all know what the other issue is, in which there's an automatic right to JC appeal. And I do not think it's fair to insist for this committee that I be denied my right to be heard by Tom Arnold, which is why I voted for him on the Judicial Committee. So even recusing himself doesn't solve the problem for me, because anything in this investigation could impinge upon some other things that are before him. We voted for the JC for a reason. Let's let them be the JC. His competence is without question. But there are a lot of people that I don't want to jump ahead to say names, but I can name a lot that I think a lot of you would go, oh, I didn't even think of that person. Second, I object to taking people out of order. It prejudices other nominees. It's not the right way to do things, even if it's procedurally allowed.
Thank you, Ms. Harlos. Mr. Harris, can you tell me who else is in the queue at this time? I see Valente and Nana's hands up. Who is after those two?
After Mr. Nana and Mr. Valente, I have Mr. Lucchini, Mr. Hagan, and Ms. Adams.
Lucchini, Hagan, and Adams. All right, we will recognize them in that order. Mr. Lucchini.
I have never spoken more in a meeting than this one. I'm going to, I know Arnold's by reputation. I think it's good. I do think that I find myself in agreement with Ms. Harlos that we have plenty of people to choose from in this. I have two people that I would like to nominate. They're not in the chat. I need to have a conversation with them. I think that nominating people now, I believe that we should adjourn and have another meeting where we can go talk to our various people and see if they're willing to serve, and then come back and then do all the nominations en masse. So I think this prejudices the process of selecting these, or at least nominating these nominees. So I would vote against this measure.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lucchini. Mr. Hagan.
Yeah, similar to what Mr. Lucchini has mentioned, I mean, Tom Arnold would probably be on top of my list. I'll probably vote for him, but I'd rather have the process of we find out who all the nominees. I know of another person who is willing to serve. His name is not mentioned yet. I'd like to know everybody that we nominated, and then we do a vote instead of the piecemeal vote.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hagan. Ms. Adams.
Yeah, I think the only thing different I would want to add to what Mr. Hagan and Mr. Lucchini said is I realize that there is a need for expediency here. I think we all agree with that. I think that's why we went ahead and passed the original motion to form this committee. We don't want to lose any more time that has already been lost. At the same time, I think there's something to be said for not also rushing to fill these people this quickly. Maybe we do need some time to explore options. It's really important that we get these committee appointments right. And I love Tom Arnold, and I think Tom Arnold is absolutely a wonderful choice for this. Even saying that, we still have two other positions, assuming we all decided tonight that Tom was the guy. I would really like for us to take just a little bit of time. I don't want to lose a ton of time on this, guys. I don't want to see us dealing with this in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, but I do think it's important that we get these appointments really, really right.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Adams. Mr. Harris, can you tell me who is next in the queue?
Yes, I believe Mr. Phillips and then Mr. Bowen.
I don't want to jump these people, but I am now actually trying to speak on this, and I've had my hand up throughout the whole discussion. So
I don't know why my hand's up, so you can take my turn.
All right. So what I'll do is I will recognize Mr. Bowen and then recognize Mr. Nana.
I'll yield to Mr. Nana and then speak afterwards, if that's in order.
That would be fine. Mr. Nana, go ahead.
all right. So obviously, I just made an attempt to adjourn earlier. I'm not sure what the difference between why we're adjourning now and why I tried to adjourn 10 minutes ago is, but here's the thing. I want to remind everybody, it takes 5 days to call a meeting of this committee. So if we're going to have another meeting, we're going to have to wait on this another 5 days at minimum.
No, we could adjourn to a date that is very soon.
Sure, we could do that. I suppose I didn't think of that. I'm actually, you know what? I actually think I'm changing my position. We need to do something tonight. This is, I mean, I know not all of us expected there to be a restriction of 5-year membership, but this is the third meeting on this. We owe our membership something, and I'm honestly not going to kick this can down the road anymore. So no, we need to do something tonight.
Okay. All right.
Mr. Chair, this is Mr. Brown.
Yes, Mr.
Just wanted to say Ms. Harless was correct when she said you can set another adjourned meeting. You don't necessarily have to go through the process of setting another special meeting.
That is correct. And, this is becoming a regular thing. We meet every night at 9 p.m. So Mr. Bowen, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, my feeling on selection of nominees for this committee, I would want to see all the nominees first before I decide to put on that committee. That's number one. Number two, I had a feeling this was going to happen. I will tell you that I have at least one state in my region, maybe others, that are very upset that we did not go the independent route, that we are nominating any LNC members, and they do not consider this formal investigation to be independent at this moment. So I just want to let people know you're going to be hearing from at least one, maybe more of the states in my region about this investigation at this point. Granted that, I will get back to you on that, but I'm not voting for anybody until I know what the entire list of the nominees are. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bowen. All right, where are we now? Mr. Harris, that was the end of the list that I had. Does anyone else have their hand up to speak on the nomination, and I guess appointment, actually, of Tom to this committee?
I be recognized, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Mr. Nicola.
I propose a substitute motion to allow 24 hours from the passage of this motion to make nominations via the LNC list, and for those nominees to be placed in an open vote where the top 3 vote getters will be placed in the committee.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. I did not get all of that wording written down.
So 24 hours from the passage of this motion will be the end of nominations, at which point the secretary shall create an open vote where the LNC members shall vote and the top 3 vote getters shall be placed on the committee.
How long shall the OPA vote be open for?
Let's say 24 hours.
That's been way too short in the past, just FYI. It's
Then
72 hours, perhaps?
72, well, 72 hours unless all members vote.
Can I make a suggestion that we make it Monday at noon for the nominations? Because a lot of people are out of town for the Father's Day weekend. Noon on Monday for the end of nominations, and then 72 hours after that for the vote.
I'm amendable if the second is amendable. Without objection.
Yes, that's fine. That's fine with me.
I have one other point of inquiry.
Madam Secretary, I'm trying to get exact wording on the amendment for the moment. I apologize. I think what I'm hearing.
My understanding would be that we would close nominations noon on Monday and then allow the open vote to be open for 72 hours. That would make it Thursday at noon, it would close.
Okay, hold on one second. Monday, 6:20 at noon. What time zone noon?
Eastern.
We do everything
Or
Pacific time zone that is standard on the list,
Pacific.
except for OPA vote, which goes by mountain. That's the only exception.
Well, that's part of the motion is OPA vote.
Well, OPA vote's always mountain because it's my account. I can't change that.
But you can make it effective so that it actually does end at noon Pacific time, right? We just make
No,
it so
it
that
asks if I'm going to have it end at a specific time, it's tied to my time zone.
Okay.
If you want to
Noon
trust
Pacific would
me
be
to
one-
manually end it somewhere around noon Pacific time, I can do that.
Well, why don't we give it 1 hour grace period? So nominations end, and then we do 49 hours later, the vote closes.
I thought it was 72.
Or sorry, fine, add 1 hour. I'm sorry. It's late.
It is. Again,
Body is amendable
I
to
want to
that.
point out this is how I'm going tonight. So
Don't do that.
it's anyhow.
Point of information, Ken.
Yes.
Hey, I heard you say 6:20 is the date. That's actually 6:21 on the.
Thank
Monday.
you. I'm trying
How
to write.
about we have a contest where the people who vote first win a certain amount of money and it goes down.
All right. So I have nominations will be open until Monday, June 21st at noon Pacific time. And an OPA vote shall be open for 72 hours.
Correct. And the top 3 vote getters will be placed in the committee.
And by top 3, are we doing which
Approval?
form of voting? Approval?
Yes.
Select as many as you like.
Correct.
Yes.
To the committee. All right. I want to, now that we've workshopped the motion, I want to read this and make sure this is the correct motion. Nominations will be open until Monday, June 21st at noon Pacific time, and an OPA vote shall be open for 70. Oh, see, that's still not right. After which.
Mr. Chair, point of information.
Yes, Miss Adams.
What is the process to verify that anyone who's nominated is eligible per the motion that passed? Specifically in regards to the 5-year membership, what's the credentialing process for that? And who's going to be in charge of that to
That
make
is
sure that we're not getting anybody on our ballot who is not eligible?
Yeah, I don't know, Miss Adams.
Can I make a suggestion, Ken?
Go ahead, Mr. Nikela.
I would ask that our membership people or Tyler Harris could look into our records, and if that record is not available, then we'd have to ask the state chair of that state to look into membership rules for that state.
Mr. Nikela, I believe the motion now states that they must have been a national party member for the last 5 years. So
Then in
that
that
would
case-
only be national.
Can I make a suggestion? Staff is going to need some time to do this. So
Yes.
why don't we make the close of the vote 6 p.m. 3 days later? That gives them I can't do math full time, so it's 5 hours or something to vet everybody who comes in at the last minute.
Okay.
I mean,
that would be sufficient for staff.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. That's exactly the question I was going to ask. So that is sufficient?
I believe that would be sufficient.
Okay.
Contingent upon the number of nominees, but assuming that that's within reasonable ranges, that should be sufficient time.
All right. So now we're at nominations open until Monday, June 21st at noon Pacific time. Staff will
How do I
validate.
submit a nomination? Sorry, I don't mean to. I mean, I'm totally unclear how we would even be submitting these nominations. Do I email the chair? Do I email the secretary?
I thought it said to the list. I thought the motion said to the list. That may have been.
Well, why don't we just
forgotten.
create a thread?
Yes, a thread would be the easiest way.
My only concern with that is that sometimes people send resumes with PII in them that's not really looking for public distribution.
Make it to the internal list then.
We could definitely do that. And we can then share the names that that have been nominated and approved prior to the ballot being open. We could do that. All right, staff will validate. Okay, noon Pacific time is going to be 3 p.m. Eastern. So that then Mr. Harris asked the question, if we close the nominations at 3 p.m. Eastern time on Monday, when would it be reasonable to expect that staff could have verified everyone?
I will personally be available at 3 p.m. Eastern time to do so if that is the will of this body. And
I will make myself available.
And depending on the number of nominees, it will take us a varying amount of time to do it, but it should go fairly quickly.
Okay.
Not longer than a few hours.
Mr. Chair, has this substitute motion been seconded, or I mean, I know we're not in a committee of the whole. I'm just kind of confused with what we're doing right now.
I am trying to get us one motion to get out of here is where we're at right now.
Yes, it was seconded.
And I do think it was seconded, but it was flawed. So,
well, that's my point. I'm totally lost. We can't workshop a motion on the floor like this. This is not a committee of the whole.
I agree.
It is not in, well, technically, but as long as there's no objection, we can move forward.
I agree, Mr. Nana. The point is well taken. We are technically acting out of order right now, trying to get it out of here. What I am hearing is basically a motion to amend that we would have nominations open until Monday, June 21st at noon Pacific time. Staff will validate the eligibility of the nominees upon close of nominations.
Why don't we just do this the right way? I move that we enter a committee of the whole.
Okay, there's been a motion to move into the committee of the whole. There is a second. Is there objection to moving into committee of the whole? I am hearing no objection. That's cool. Great. Now we can talk even more freely. So that's good.
Yeah.
And by the way, seconds no longer in a committee of the whole. Seconds, motions do not require seconds, just so everyone knows. It's a thing.
Can we just finish reading this? I think we're all in agreement.
Right. Okay. Nominations open until Monday, June 21st at noon Pacific time. Staff will validate the eligibility of the nominees upon the close of nominations. And then after which an OPA vote shall be open for 72 hours, and the top three via approval voting shall be appointed to the committee. Does that sound right to everybody?
Yes.
Everybody got a better way to do it?
Well, I don't know that I'd limit them to close of nominations. If Tyler's sitting there in the office at 10 o'clock and he can get 10 names out of the way, yeah, well, I don't know that I'd limit him on verification to the close of nominations. That's all I'm saying.
I don't think the motion says that. It just says that once he's done validating, we go forward with the vote. I believe he can start validating as soon as nominations come in.
I see what I actually do see what Mr. Phillips is saying. All right. Here's what I need to do. That's where it is. So I broke the paragraph in the wrong place, Mr. Phillips. The second sentence, staff will validate eligibility of the nominees, period. Upon close of nominations, an OPA vote shall be open for 72 hours. I'll see, that's still not right. Yeah, upon
How about upon close and validation?
Yes. On close of validation. That'll work. An OPA vote shall be open for 72 hours, and the top 3 via approval voting shall be appointed to the committee. I see you, Mr. Lucchini. I agree with that hand gesture, sir. Anybody, is everyone good with that wording?
Could you read it one more time, Ken?
Yes. And by the way, we're in a committee of the whole. You do not have to raise hands here. I mean, you can just talk, just in case people are raising hands looking to be recognized. Committee of the whole is much more free flow. Nominations are open until Monday, June 21st at noon Pacific time. Staff will validate eligibility of the nominees. Upon close of the validation, an OPA vote shall be open for 72 hours, and the top 3 via approval voting shall be appointed to the committee.
I'm aligned with that.
Sounds good to me.
Does anyone have a problem with that? Any tweaks, anything? Going once, going twice. All right, I'm going to ask if there is a motion to rise from the committee of the whole.
So moved.
Yep, second.
There's a move and a second. Is there objection to rising from the committee of the whole? I am not hearing an objection. All right, so with no objection, we are now back at the regular session. And if someone would be so kind as to move the work product of our committee of the whole.
Oh, so move the work product of our committee of the whole.
Second.
Right, so we have a motion and a second. I'm going to reread the motion so that we know what we're talking about. Nominations are open until Monday, June 21st at noon Pacific time. Staff will validate eligibility of the nominees. Upon close of the validation, an OPA vote shall be open for 72 hours, and the top 3 via approval voting shall be appointed to the committee. That is the motion on the floor. I'm just going to ask, do we need any discussion about this? I am not hearing any discussion. So I'm going to ask if there is objection to passing this motion. I'm going to ask one more time.
I object on that. I want a roll call. I want to request a roll call.
Mr. Bowen objects, wants a roll call. That is within your rights, sir. Not a problem. Madam Secretary, can you read the roll? Let's do this thing.
Ms. Bilyeu.
Yes.
Mr. Bowen.
Abstain.
Ms. Epke.
Yes.
Mr. Hagan.
Yes.
I shall abstain. Mr. Hewitt.
I will abstain for the previously stated reasons.
Ms. Hogarth.
She has not returned.
Mr. Valenti.
Yes.
Mr. Longstreth.
I will abstain.
Mr. Nana.
I'm going to pass.
Mr. Nikela.
I vote aye.
Mr. Phillips.
Yes.
Mr. Radset.
Yes.
Ms. Sarwark.
I'll vote yes.
Mr. Smith.
What's the count?
8 in favor, 0 opposed, 4 abstentions.
I'll vote yes.
Mr. Lucchini.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going back to, who am I going back to? Mr. Nana.
I will vote yes.
Okay, Mr. Chair, it is 11 yes, 0 no, 4 abstentions.
Only 15, Madam Secretary. I just want to verify.
The total is 15.
Because I am the number 16. I will not vote.
I move to adjourn.
Yeah, but let me, real quick, that means that the motion passes 11 to 0 to 4. Thank you all for this. There's been a motion to adjourn by Mr. Lucchini. Is there a second?
Second.
There are multiple seconds. Is there objection to adjourning at this time?
Objection. Sorry.
Ms. Sarwark objects to adjourning at this time. Okay, as I recall, we do not debate this. So let's do a roll call on adjournment.
Give me one moment as I'm clearing the ballot. Ms. Bilyeu,
Yes.
Mr. Bowen,
Are we voting on? I'm sorry.
adjourning,
Adjournment? Okay. Yes.
Ms. Epke,
Yes.
Mr. Hagan.
Yes.
I will vote yes. Mr. Hewitt,
Yes.
Ms. Hogarth, Mr. Valenti.
Yes.
Mr. Longstreth,
Yes.
Mr. Nana,
No.
Mr. Nikela,
Aye.
Mr. Phillips,
Abstain.
Mr. Routset,
Yes.
Ms. Sarwark,
No.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Lucchini,
I wish Robert's rules wasn't this way. I'm going to abstain.
Okay, Mr. Chair, we have 11 in favor, 2 opposed, 2 abstentions.
All right, and I will not vote. With 11 to 2, the motion to adjourn passes. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for spending your Father's Day weekend with the committee and doing this important business.
Thank you. Good night.
Before we shut off the Zoom, does anybody want to stick around and talk about this? Because like I said earlier, I don't think this is going to get done over email very effectively. And I'd rather not have backroom deals and calls between certain members. And that's
Mr.
just
Nana,
where we just came from.
let me ask Mr. Harris, since the official business is closed, can we shut off the live stream, please?
Yes.